2. Jessie and the Poor Widow. One day, says Sam Allender, Frank James told me that on a certain occasion he and his pals was traveling on horseback somewhere in northern Missouri. It being about noon, they were hungry. They pulled off the main road and found a lone woman in charge of a small farmhouse. They asked her if she could supply them with something to eat. At first, the woman hesitated, and the men displayed money and assured her they would be glad to pay for what they ate. Then she proceeded to prepare such scant food as she had on hand. As she was making coffee and cooking eggs, James' crowd sat around the room. They noticed that she was weeping. Tears were rolling down her cheeks, and sobs were heaving in her bosom. Jessie, said Frank, telling me the story, was always tender-hearted, couldn't stand a woman's tears. When he asked her why she was crying, she tried to smile it off, and said that seeing us men around the house reminded her of how happy a time she was when her husband was living and had other men now and then helping him to do the farm work. She was just thinking how sadly things had changed since his death, and that was what made her cry. So she said. Jessie kept on asking questions. The woman said she had several children at school some miles down the road. There was a mortgage on the farm, and she went on to say it was for $1,400. It was overdue, and it was the last day of grace. Aha, said Jessie. So that's really what's making you cry. You're afraid you're going to lose your home, I see. Yes, that was it, she admitted. That very afternoon she was a weeping widow, and the man who held the mortgage was coming out of town to demand his money. He was a hard-hearted old miser, she stated, and she didn't have a dollar to apply to the debts. The man would be sure to foreclose and turn her and her helpless little ones out. Huh? Said Jessie. That's so. His eyes blinking fast and furiously. Well, now, ma'am, I don't know about that. Well, no. I think maybe you'll lose your farm after all. The widow looked rather puzzled. She put the food on the table and all sat down and turned to. After we finished eating, Jessie produced a sack and counted it out on the table. $1,400. Here, lady, said Jessie. Take this money and pay off your mortgage. The lady was amazed. I can never pay you back, she said, and so I won't borrow it. But it's no loan, said Jessie. It's a gift. The widow said she couldn't believe it was anything but a dream. Things never happened that way, but Jessie assured her it was no dream. The money was good money, and it was for her use. Jessie then sat down and wrote out a form of receipts, which she had the woman copy in her own handwriting. He put the original in his pocket so that his handwriting wouldn't get into other hands. Jessie instructed the woman to pay the mortgage holder the $1,400 and gave him the sign and receipts in ink. Then he handed her a handful of cash for her immediate needs. Jessie asked the grateful widow to describe the man who held the mortgage. So she did, telling him the kind of rig he drove and what hour she expected him and the road by which he would come from the town. Then we bade her good day and mounted our horses. The widow was still weeping, but now weeping for joy. We rode some distance from the house and hid in the bushes beside the rocky road along the mortgage man was to come in his buggy. Presently we saw him driving toward the widow's house, and pretty soon driving back, looking prosperous. He was humming. Old Dan Tucker was a fine old feller as he came opposite. We stepped out onto the road and hailed him up, and recovered the $1,400. I asked Frank James, said Sam Adler, if they had any other difficulty in getting the money on that occasion than they had had on the other occasion when they first acquired it, and he replied with a laugh, No, Sam, I'm not getting sweaty.